So, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 All right, so we can start. So you can start reading by reading text, the first text of the three modes of material nature.
Yes, sir. Chapter 14. The three modes of material nature. Text 1. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "Again, I shall declare to you the supreme wisdom, the best of all knowledge, knowing which all the sages have attained the supreme perfection." Text 2. By becoming fixed in this knowledge, one can attain to the transcendental nature like my own. Thus established, one is not born at the time of creation or disturbed at the time of dissolution. Text 3. The total material substance called Brahman is the source of birth, and it is that Brahman that I impregnate, making possible the births of all living beings, O son of Bharat. Text 4. It should be understood that all species of life, O son of Kunti, are made possible by birth in this material nature, and that I am the seed giving father. Text 5. Material nature consists of three
Okay.
modes.
So hold the text for a second.
Yes, sir.
All right. So Krishna is saying he's going to just declare the supreme wisdom, the best of all knowledge. By knowing that the sages have attained the supreme perfection, and so by becoming fixed in this knowledge, one can attain the transcendental nature like my own. So he is not knowledge, bliss, and eternity. We can attain that nature just like him. Thus established, one is not born at the time of creation and not disturbed at the time of dissolution. So there is no birth, disease, old age, and death when we attain that nature. And the total material substance called Brahman is the source of birth, and it is that Brahman that I impregnate, making possible the births of all living entities. So it should be understood that all species of life, O son of Kunti, are made possible by birth in this material nature, and I am the seed-giving father. So So chapter 13 describes the conditioned soul as distinct from material nature and yet entangled by it. So that's nature, enjoyer, and consciousness. Trapped within his field of activities. And chapter 14 reveals how, in detail, the living entity is limited and controlled within his field by the powerful shackles of material nature, the three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. At the end of chapter 14, Krishna informs us how to attain freedom from these modes. So Krishna again uses the word bhuya to indicate he will repeat that knowledge that he mentioned in 1322. How is this knowledge the best of all? And 1322 is Purusha Prakriti Shto Hi Bhunte Prakriti Jan Gunan Karanam Gunasangosya Sarasadyo Nijanmashu. That the living entity in material nature thus follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of nature, and this is due to his association with that material nature. So he mentioned the three modes of material nature. Now he's going to go ahead and explain in detail the three modes of material nature. So Then Baladev with devotion explains Krishna words. Again, I will speak of knowledge different from what I have spoken so far. It deals specifically with the modes of nature. It is the best of all kinds of knowledge about Prakriti and Jiva, and it resembles the distillation of yoga from milk. Realizing this knowledge and meditating upon it thoughtfully, all great sages attain in this very world correct perception of the Supreme Soul. So after glorifying the knowledge that he is about to reveal, Krishna begins to explain the relationship between material nature and the conditioned living entities. So Krishna now describes the soul's entanglement. He first identifies himself as the source, the ultimate father of all living entities. Srila Prabhupada says the purport is that the material world is impregnated with living entities who come out in various forms at the time of creation according to the past deeds. The placement of souls under the control of material nature is next described, and that's where we're going to go to text 5. So, text 5, material nature consists of 3 modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. When the eternal living entity comes in contact with nature, Almighty Arjuna, he becomes conditioned by these 3 modes. O sinless one, the mode of goodness being purer than the others is illuminating, and it frees one from all sinful reactions. Those situated in that mode become conditioned by a sense of happiness and knowledge. And 7, the mode of passion is born of unlimited desires and longings. O son of Kunti, because of this, the embodied living entity is bound to material fruitive activities. And 8, O son of Bharat, know that the mode of darkness, born of ignorance, is the delusion of all embodied living entities. The results of this mode are madness, indolence, and sleep, which bind the conditioned soul. Alright, so this is an introduction here, and it says, O son of Bharat, the mode of goodness conditions one to happiness, passion conditions one to fruitive action, and ignorance, covering one's knowledge, binds one to madness. So sometimes the mode of goodness becomes prominent, defeating the modes of passion and ignorance, O son of Bharat. Sometimes the mode of passion defeats goodness and ignorance, and at other times ignorance defeats goodness and passion. In this way, there is always competition for supremacy. The manifestation of the mode of goodness can be experienced when all the gates of the body are illuminated by knowledge. So, we can go from 5 to 10. Alright, so 5 here explains the composition of material nature, which is the 3 modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. So this mode of goodness, the mode of passion, the mode of ignorance, is what motivates activity in the material world. So by this conception of goodness, passion, and ignorance, the living entity comes in contact with material nature, and he becomes conditioned by these 3 modes. So then he says that this mode of goodness, being purer than others, is illuminating, and it frees one from all sinful reactions, and those situated in that mode become conditioned by a sense of happiness and knowledge. And then passion is born of unlimited desires and longings, and because of this, the embodied living entity is bound to material fruitive activities. And then the mode of darkness, born of ignorance, is the delusion of all embodied living entities. The result of this mode are madness, indolence, and sleep, which bind the conditioned soul. Okay, so 5 through 8. So here it said the eternal living entity comes in contact with material nature and becomes conditioned by it. In other words, despite his desire for independent enjoyment, his existence is subject to strict control by the modes of material nature. So like the example I was giving yesterday is if you take a piece of wood and you drop it in a stream, it goes downstream. It's now under the flow of the water going downstream. So when we get engaged in materialism, we are then under the control of the modes of material nature and the way the modes of material nature act. So the fault which causes the conditioned soul, the soul's conditioned state, rests in his own independent desire. Yes, we cannot blame Krishna any more than a criminal can blame a judge for his jail sentence. So we have misused our minute independence. Out of enmity towards Krishna, we have rejected our constitutional position as a servitor. And therefore we come to this temporary material world. So that's Icha, Dvesha, Samutena, Dvandva, Mohena, Bharata. So we come to this material world because of desire and hate. So all jivas in the spiritual world willingly and lovingly keep Krishna's service at the center of their consciousness. How then can we live there? So, once we come to the material world, we assume a false identity, false ego. So, our ego is pure spirit soul, which is called Brahman or spirit. But when we become engaged in materialism, we develop the false ego. So then he says, the mode of goodness being pure in others is illuminating, and it frees one from all sinful reaction. And those situated in that mode become conditioned by a sense of happiness and knowledge. But one can remain in the mode of goodness for a long time. Arjuna is addressed as anagha or sinless. The two sins of the mode of goodness are attachment to sukha, happiness, and jnana, knowledge. But Arjuna is not bound by either. It is attachment to happiness and knowledge, not happiness and knowledge themselves, that binds the living entity in the mode of goodness. So such attachment breeds pride, and both attachment and pride are symptoms of the mode of passion. In other words, attachment to jnana causes ajnana, ignorance. As Srila Prabhupada explains in his purport, the difficulty here is that when a living entity is situated in the mode of goodness, he becomes conditioned to feel he is advanced in knowledge and is better than others. In this way, he becomes conditioned. So, here, the thing about it is that the mode of goodness is based on happiness and knowledge. But here it is said that the attachment to happiness and knowledge, not happiness and knowledge themselves, binds a living entity in the mode of goodness. So we always have to remember, it's not material nature, but it's the attachment to material nature. So such attachment breeds pride, and both attachment and pride are symptoms of the mode of passion. So this can happen where one can go into the mode of passion. So the difficulty here is that when a living entity is situated in the mode of goodness, he becomes conditioned to feel he is advanced in knowledge and is better than others. In this way, he becomes conditioned. So we know a lot of people who are advanced in knowledge, who are in a happy situation in this material world, and they think they are better than others. And in that way, they become conditioned to that state and that mode. Then the mode of passion is born of unlimited desires and longings. And because of this, the embodied entity is bound to material fruit of action. So here it is said in text 6, the word nirmala, pure, was used. Here, raga, which means colored, is used. The person in the mode of passion sees everything colored by his unlimited desires, and he experiences Shrishna Sanga, a thirst for hankering for boundless material enjoyment. And because of his intense multiple hankerings, he's always forced to engage in karma sanga, which is hard work. So if he develops the material desires, obviously he's going to have to try to satisfy those desires. And then 8 talks about the mode of darkness, which is born of ignorance, and that's the delusion of all embodied living beings. It results in madness, indolence, sleep, and it binds the conditioned soul. So here it is said, in goodness we can work purely, in passion we can at least produce fruits from our work that may be over to Krishna. Ignorance, however, produces nothing but deeper ignorance. Sattva, goodness, causes inactivity based on knowledge, but Tama, ignorance, causes inactivity based on a lack of knowledge. So here is the difference. Sattva creates inactivity based on knowledge, but ignorance creates inactivity based on a lack of knowledge. So the use of the word two here indicates that ignorance is opposed to the other modes. Pramada, madness, opposes goodness. Alasya, indolence, opposes passion. And nidra, sleep, opposes both goodness and passion. So these are the modes, madness, indolence, and sleep, which bind the conditioned soul. So here Prabhupada is saying the mode of ignorance is just the opposite of the mode of goodness. In the mode of goodness, by development of knowledge, one can understand what is what. By the mode of ignorance, is just the opposite. Everyone under the spell of the mode of ignorance becomes mad, and the madman cannot understand what is what. Instead of making advancement, one becomes degraded. So that's 5 through 9. So we read.
Lord Krishna is saying that the mode of darkness is born of ignorance. So can one say that these truths that Lord Krishna has stated in Bhagavad Gita, because we are born of we are ignorant of these truths, or like the majority of the society is ignorant of these truths, that is why they are all operating in a mode of darkness? I mean, for instance, like body association, for instance, thinking this is it, there is nothing beyond it, and these kind of body conceptions, these are all ignorance, and that is why we are all operating in a mode of darkness. Is that right? Prabhuji, you are on mute.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So there's the condition is the modes of passion and ignorance together. Passion causes the desire for fruitive activity and spurs one on in material pursuits. And then ignorance covers one's knowledge. So with ignorance, we are not even concerned with knowledge. So passion goes into fruitive activity or the material desire, and ignorance is just sitting there and going through life as it comes, not trying to make any. Yeah. So basically those are the mixed modes of passion and ignorance. And it's not just ignorance, because there's a lot of passion in material life. Now they're talking on the news about flying cars, right? So there's that much passion where they're trying to enjoy as much as possible, to manipulate the material nature as much as possible. But then some people on the motor will say, what's the use? What happens, it happens. If it doesn't happen, I don't care. Right? So that's the actual mode of ignorance. So basically, that's the difference. So what do you think?
Yes, I think um, I think that you're absolutely right. I see now the difference that ignorance is even more. I mean, it's like it's madness in as indolence and sleep. It's even more like you basically you have become you're not even participating in the society, or it's almost like you're I was thinking of passion. I think passion is where people are trying to go for furtive activities, but they don't know that those furtive activities are binding them and they will lead to unhappiness and misery. But the mode of ignorance is even worse. Basically, it's just people have, as you said, people have given up, and people have the people who are in mode of ignorance, they've just become, yeah, they are not able to even lead their life. I see the distinction now. Yeah, I was thinking of mode of passion. You are right, Prabhuji.
All right, so it's a mixed mode of passion and ignorance. And so Prabhupada, when he analyzed the life in America, that's what he saw. So basically, the purpose of Krishna consciousness is to gradually bring one to the mode of goodness so they can accept their spiritual knowledge. And then you go to Vishuddha Sattva, which is you go above the modes of material nature and to understand transcendence, to act in transcendence. Okay, so now text 10, you read that. It says sometimes the mode of goodness becomes prominent, defeating the modes of passion and ignorance, and sometimes the mode of passion defeats goodness and ignorance. Other times, ignorance defeats goodness and passion. In this way, there's always competition for supremacy. So the modes of material nature are struggling for supremacies. So we can actually understand that by being in the mode of goodness. We have some good education, we have some good knowledge, we are in a happy situation, and then we think ourselves better than others, all right? And we fall down into the mode of passion because now we're showing that because of our activity, we are better than the others. And so we fall down a little bit into the mode of passion because of that. So text 11. You want to go ahead and read from text 11.
Text 11. The manifestation of the mode of goodness can be experienced when all the gates of the body are illuminated by knowledge. Text 12. O chief of Bharatas, when there is an increase in the mode of passion, the symptoms of great attachment, furtive activity, intense endeavor, and uncontrollable desire and hankering develop. Text 13. When there is an increase in the mode of ignorance, O son of Kuru, darkness, inertia, madness, and illusion are manifested. Text 14. When one dies in the mode of goodness, he attains to the pure higher planets of the great sages. Text 15.
All right, so hold that. We're going to go through text 10 through 13, all right? So here it says the modes are competing for supremacy, and the manifestation of modes can be experienced when all the gates of the body are illuminated by knowledge. So when one is in the mode of goodness, you know, he's in a mode of cleanliness and seeking proper knowledge, proper understanding of how things work and how things are, and he has a tendency to become happy and peaceful in this world. So when there's an increase in the mode of passion, the symptoms of great attachment, fruitive activity, intense endeavor, and uncontrollable desire, hankering develop. So basically, it's like you go shopping in the mall, all right? You decide that you were buying some gifts or something like that, or you're buying general household things. But when you go through there, you see so many things that you think, well, I can have that. I'd like to have that. And then that induces the mode of passion by attachment to the material nature and the benefits of material nature. You come into the mode of passion. Now you're thinking, well, I have to put aside so much money to do this. If I use my credit card, I can do this. If I work a little harder, I make some overtime, I'll make the money to pay that back. And so this is what happens. That the great attachment, fruit of activity, and then intense endeavor. And then what happens? Once you decide, this is what you're going to do, then you have this uncontrollable desire and hankering develop. So now it's not only a thought anymore; it's a motivation, and this is how it happens. Now, when there's an increase in the mode of ignorance, O son of Kuru, darkness, inertia, madness, and illusion are manifested. So this is an explanation of the three modes of material nature. So the mode of goodness, everything, all the gates of the body are illuminated by knowledge. So you speak nicely, you see things in the proper light and things like that. You hear the best things, you hear things that will increase your knowledge. So some people, they hear the same things, but they have completely different reactions to what they've heard. And so the person in the mode of goodness, when he hears knowledge explained, he's satisfied, and he wants to understand that knowledge. The person in the mode of passion is thinking, well, maybe I can use this for my benefit. And then in the mode of ignorance, he says, well, I don't care, just leave it like that. Is that what it is? Okay, that's what it is. So these are the manifestation of the modes. And then from text 14, so go ahead and read from 14, where it talks about dying in the modes.
14. When one dies in the mode of goodness, he attains to the pure higher planets of the great sea. Text 15. When one dies in the mode of passion, he takes birth among those engaged in putative activities. And when one dies in the mode of ignorance, he takes birth in the animal kingdom. Text 16. The result of pious action is pure and is said to be in the mode of goodness. But action done in the mode of passion results in misery, and action performed in the mode of mode of ignorance results in foolishness. Text 17. From the mode of goodness, real knowledge develops. From the mode of passion, greed develops. And from the mode of ignorance, develop foolishness, madness, and illusion. Text 18. Those situated in the mode of goodness gradually go upward to the higher planets. Those in the mode of passion live on the earthly planets, and those in the abominable mode of ignorance go down to the hellish worlds. Text 19.
Okay, so hold on. So we're going to do 14 through 18. Okay, so talking about when one dies in the mode of goodness, he attains to the pure higher planets of the great sages. So it says that the next three verses discuss the results of acting in each of the modes. And the results of pious action is pure and is said to be in the mode of goodness. So while developing our Krishna consciousness, we must attempt to perform services, at least in the mode of goodness. Service tinged by passion and ignorance adversely affects our consciousness. And how can we aspiring devotees become purified enough to serve in goodness? And then Srila Prabhupada explained the process. If one hears about Krishna or God, then gradually becomes freed from the clutches. He becomes free from the clutches of darkness and passion, and actually he comes to the platform of goodness. And when he is perfectly in goodness, then this passion and ignorance and their byproducts cannot touch him. Tada rajastama bhava kamalobadayaschaye. If we hear the Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita regularly, Then we become free from the effects of the modes of ignorance and passion, and gradually, though it takes time, but it is sure. The more you hear about Krishna, Krishna means his instruction, or about him and what he is, the more you become purified. So this is the test of how one has to become purified. One purified from the base qualities of passion and ignorance is no more attacked by greediness and passion. When he is no more disturbed by these base qualities of passion and greediness, he is happy. Okay, and this is from a discussion between Srila Prabhupada and Hayagriva on Socrates. Okay, so here it said, right, while developing, we must attempt to perform our services at least in the mode of goodness. But if we perform our service tinged with passion and ignorance, that adversely affects our consciousness. So we can actually, if we perform our service in the mode of passion and ignorance, we can eventually think that because of my service I'm becoming better than the other devotees. However, in Krishna consciousness, what happens is the more we advance in Krishna consciousness, the more we see that every living entity is available to receive Krishna consciousness, is a servant of the Supreme Lord, and it's only because there was attachment in material nature that he is acting like that. So we have great respect for all personalities. Of course, we don't associate with people in the mode of ignorance. We associate with people in the mode of goodness, so that we can have a better mood and activity. So you find that a lot of people, they do devotional service, and it's tinged with a little bit of passion and ignorance. There is the mode of goodness in there because it's taking instruction from the spiritual master. But because they're thinking that because if they do this service, they're better than others, that's tinged with passion and ignorance, and it adversely affects our consciousness. So here Prabhupada is giving this, how can aspiring devotees become purified enough to serve in goodness? And this is the secret right here. Hearing the Bhagavatam, associating with devotees, performing devotional service. So the test is one has to become purified from the base qualities of passion and ignorance. When he is more eager to hear about Krishna and think about Krishna, then what happens? He is no more attached by greediness and passion. So you find that it's a very, very difficult situation, but if we do it purely, within the right mood, we can actually advance in Krishna consciousness instead of staying on the same level for a long time. So we want to climb above that lower state, and in that way we hear more about Krishna. We listen to lectures by personalities who are preaching Krishna consciousness, imbibe that knowledge from them, understand how they are explaining this process of Krishna consciousness. So this is what happens here. So we must attempt to perform service at least in the mode of goodness. So the result of pious action is pure and is said to be in the mode of goodness, but action done in the mode of passion results in misery, and action performed in the mode of ignorance results in foolishness. So from the mode of goodness, real knowledge develops, and from the mode of passion, greed develops. From the mode of ignorance, foolishness, madness, and illusion develops. So here, while text 16 describes the results of action in each of the three modes of nature, this text explains the intermediate causes of those results. So it's often action in the mode of goodness results in knowledge, which brings about proper action, resulting in purity. Action in passion results in misery because it is caused by unlimited desires and insatiable greed. Action in ignorance brings about madness and illusion, which cause one to act foolishly. So Srila Prabhupada stresses development of the mode of goodness. Since the present civilization is not very congenial to the living entities, Krishna consciousness is recommended. Through Krishna consciousness, society will develop the mode of goodness. When the mode of goodness is developed, people will see things as they are. In the mode of ignorance, people are just like animals and cannot see things clearly. So the animals, they just go through eating, sleeping, mating, defending. That's it. They don't do anything else. In the mode of passion, people become greedy and their hankering for sense enjoyment has no limit. So this is the reason for so much development in this material world, because of the mode of passion. And they think that the more they manipulate the modes of material nature, or material nature, the happier they can become. Yeah. So those situated in the modes of goodness gradually go up to the higher planets. All right. So this is explaining that when we utilize the mode of goodness, then what happens is we begin to go upwards in the development. So the majority of people don't even have an idea that there is some development in material life. They think that what we see here is what it is. All right, so okay, so those situated in the mode of goodness gradually go upward to the higher planets. Those in the modes of passion live on the earthly planets, and those in the abominable mode of ignorance go down to the hellish planets. When one properly sees that in all activities no other performer is at work in these three modes of nature, he knows the Supreme Lord, who is transcendental to all these modes. He attains my spiritual nature. When the embodied being is able to transcend these three modes associated with the material body, he can become free from birth, death, old age, and their distresses, and can enjoy nectar even in this life. Okay, so then Arjuna is asking questions here. Alright, so basically we would advise everyone to come to the mode of goodness, because from the mode of goodness you go higher. Now Krishna is explaining in devotional service that if you can't take the devotional service, in the full mode, then what happens is you can practice the sadhana bhakti, and that way you come to a higher stage. By practicing sadhana bhakti, you actually become addicted to Krishna consciousness, right? But those who can't do that, he advises them to work for him. So they can work for him, and in some cases Prabhupada talks about people giving donations to even build temples and things like that. So to assist in the propagation of Krishna consciousness is like working for him. So if you're working for the benefit of the devotees, benefit of the Supreme Lord, all right? But if you can't do that, right, then he says, then just cultivate knowledge, and by cultivating knowledge you can come to a proper understanding. But better than cultivating knowledge is performing yoga, all right? And he says if you can't do all of these, then simply do some pious activity. And by that pious activity of giving charity and things like that, you will be able gradually to come to the mode of goodness where you can understand this philosophy of Krishna consciousness. So he advises that we come to the mode of goodness. And here it said Those in the mode of goodness, they gradually go upward to the higher planets. So when one properly sees that in all activities no other performer is at work in the modes of material nature, he knows the Supreme Lord who is transcendental to all these modes. Now what does that mean really? So if we see here, Krishna here equates transcending the modes of material nature with liberation from the material world. The first step is to observe the modes working upon us. So when we see how the modes of nature are working, then we can actually see that it's the modes of nature that's causing this. So if we didn't engage in that passionate mood, we wouldn't have to work so hard. We wouldn't have to try to, advance in this world and then try to think that because of that advancement we are better than others. So then by observing the modes at work, we can understand that the modes, not we, are active. Because if we perform activity for Krishna consciousness, if we perform devotional service, it does not really improve our material situation. Of course, Krishna takes care of everyone, and he assists everyone in their material situation also, so that they can become happy, peaceful, and they can finally go back to Godhead. So in this way we come to understand that we are eternal living entities, separate from both our everyday activities and the modes. So then we actually begin to see ourselves as the eternal living being. We don't see ourselves as the body or working in this material situation. We see ourselves on a higher platform. And then the second step is to understand Krishna's position. Although Krishna appears to be acting within the material sphere, he is fully transcendental. And here Srila Prabhupada is right, a man in Krishna consciousness is not controlled by the spell of the material modes of nature. It has already been stated in the 7th chapter, 7, 13 and 14, that one who has surrendered to Krishna is relieved from the activity of the material nature. For one who is able to see things as they are, the influence of material nature gradually ceases. And the 7, 13 to 14 is deluded by the three modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance. The whole world does not know me, who above these modes. And then the other one is Daivihi Esha Gunamayi Mama Maya Durataya Mami Vayaka Pajante Maya Metam Tarantite. That is, that this divine energy of mind is consisting of the three modes of material nature is difficult to overcome. But those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. And Krishna continuously gives this surrender as the mode, as the reason or the way to advance in this Krishna consciousness and to understand this knowledge. So when the embodied being is able to transcend these modes associated with which he can become free from birth, death, old age, and disease, and their distresses, and can enjoy nectar even in this life. So here, a person free from the modes of nature is free from the distress and enjoys life on the spiritual platform. And then Arjuna begins to ask 3 questions about transcending the modes of material nature in text 21. So we can go to text 21. So 21 through 27. Okay, we have about 9 minutes. We should be able to finish this chapter. So why don't you go ahead and read from text 21.
Text 21. Arjun inquired, O my dear Lord, by which symptoms is one known who is transcendental to these 3 modes? What is his behavior, and how does he transcend the modes of nature? Text 22 to 25. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O son of Pandu, he who does not hate illumination, attachment, and delusion when they are present or long for them when they disappear, who is unwavering and undisturbed through all these reactions of the material qualities, remaining neutral and transcendental, knowing that the modes alone are active, who is situated in the self and regards alike happiness and distress, who looks upon a lump of earth, a stone, and a piece of gold with an equal eye, who is equal towards the desirable and the undesirable, who is steady, situated equally well in praise and blame, honor and dishonor, who treats alike both friend and enemy, and who has renounced all material activities, such a person is said to have transcended the modes of nature. Text 26. One who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the mode of material nature, and thus comes to the level of Brahman. Text 27. And I am the basis of the impersonal Brahman, which is immortal, imperishable, and eternal, and is the constitutional position of ultimate happiness. Prabhuji, you are on mute if you. I don't know if you're.
So Arjuna is inquiring about the symptoms of one who is transcendental for these modes, what his behavior is, and how does he transcend the modes of nature. And so the Supreme Lord is explaining, he does not hate illumination, attachment, and delusion when they are present or long for them when they disappear. He takes everything as it comes naturally. He is not attached to any situation, whether it be pleasant or unpleasant. He is unwavering and undisturbed through all these reactions of the material qualities, remaining neutral and transcendental, knowing that the modes alone are active. So basically he is seeing that the reason for the situation is because of his engagement in material nature, and he knows that the modes are acting there. So he just waits, and he's patient. So who is self, who is situated in the self and regards alike happiness and distress, who looks upon a lump of earth, a stone, piece of gold with an equal eye, and who is equal to what the desirable and undesirable. So it is said that the Goswamis, they were friends of the ruffians as well as the transcendentalists or the people and pious people. So they had the respect of both people. So who is steady, situated equally well in praise and blame, honor and dishonor. So that's being equally well in praise and blame, honor and dishonor means that we continue to do our work in Krishna consciousness, despite the fact that we might not get the proper say praise, the proper. So we might think, well, okay, we have to get some kind of reciprocation. The person who does it equally well in praise and blame, honor and dishonor, who treats alike both friend and enemy. So this is difficult to do, treating alike both friend and enemy. So it doesn't mean that we're going to take the shelter of the enemy or associate with him but what happens is we won't try to dissuade him, or we won't try to cause him trouble. So basically what happens is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he didn't come to kill the demons like Krishna comes Vinashaya Chaduskritam, right? But here he came to destroy the demoniac mentality. So this is the way to become, a friend to everyone, who treats her like both friend and enemy, knowing that the friend as well as the enemy needs Krishna consciousness, needs this advancement in knowledge. And then again, it's said earlier in Bhagavad Gita that so as not to dissuade those who are attracted to fruitive activities, we should not induce them to stop work. But by acting in the spirit of devotion, we engage them in all sorts of activities for the gradual development of Krishna consciousness. So, this is actually the mode. Let's see what is said in here, 22 to 25. So, two of the questions are answered in these verses. The answer primarily to text 22 to the first question explains that the transcendental is neutral to the modes. He is free from hankering and envy, being indifferent to their pushings. Those are the symptoms of one unaffected by the modes. Srila Prabhupada writes, when one is conscious of the material body, he acts only for sense gratification. But when one transfers the consciousness to Krishna, sense gratification automatically stops. One does not need this material body, and he does not need to accept the dictations of the material body. The qualities of the material modes in the body will act, but as spirit soul, the self is aloof from such activities. And how does he become aloof? He does not desire to enjoy the body, he does not desire to get out of it. Thus, transcendentally situated, the devotee becomes automatically free. He need not try to become free from the influence of the modes of nature. And then the next question is, what is such a person's behavior? And here it is answered in text 23 to 25. So he is equally disposed and he sees everything equally because he has realized that he has nothing to do with material existence. Such a person never acts whimsically. Rather, in full surrender to Krishna and aloof from the modes, he executes his Krishna conscious duties with fixed determination. So then again, that determination comes from those who have acted piously in previous lives and in this life, and whose sinful reactions are completely eradicated. They can engage in the service of the Lord with determination. So, this is the behavior of such a person. He sees he's equally disposed, and that's text 23 to 25. While the answers to both questions seem similar, there is a subtle difference. The symptoms, text 22, are perceivable only by the person himself, where the behavior, 23 to 25, is perceivable by others. Okay? So, this 23 allows you to understand the material nature and to understand that you're pure spirit soul. But then, by that activity, such a person executes this type of behavior. And so the basic point is the same. Through knowledge, we become detached from the pushings of the modes and liberated from this world. And Krishna ends this chapter by discussing bhakti, the mode of transcending. And this verse is text 26. In fact, there's two of them. Right? So if we look at 22 to 25. It says, Sama Dukha Sukha Swashta Samalostra Smakanchana. So that actually is seeing, let me see here. So, equally, seeing a lump of earth, stone, kanchana, gold, equally disposed. He's seeing those things equally. He doesn't make any distinction between that. And in truth and fact, basically, Chanakya Pandit says you should see other people's possession as garbage in the street. So it doesn't really affect your modes, your understanding, or your situation in life. It doesn't increase your situation in any way. So this one here is Mam Chayo Vyabhicharina Bhakti Yogena Sevate Saguna Samati Chaitam Brahma Bhuya Kalpate. So one who engages in full devotional service, and this is a famous verse. It's 1426. Yeah, who engages in full devotion and feeling in all circumstances at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. This verse is a reply to Arjuna's third question. What is the means of attaining the transcendental position? So, he asked those three questions, and these are the answers that are given here. Brahman is also, but it's not that much of a famous. Brahmano hi pratishtaham amrityas vayasya saspatasya cha dharmasya sukhasya ikantikasya cha. I am the basis of the impersonal Brahman, which is immortal, imperishable, and eternal, and is the constitutional position of ultimate. So that Brahman is the Paramatma, the Super Soul, right? That impersonal Brahman is that personality. So both Paramatma and the impersonal Brahman are within the Supreme Person. And here it says, Krishna is a concentrated form of Brahman, as the sun is the intensified form of light. Although Krishna and Brahman are non-different, Krishna is the support of Brahman. The completeness of Brahman is Krishna. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains Krishna's words. He says, because everything is dependent on me, if one worships me with a desire for impersonal merging, he will merge into Brahman and attain the nature of Brahman. So Arjuna too has confirmed at the Param Brahma, the Supreme Truth, the personality of Godhead in 10.3. And you probably remember this verse, Param Brahma, Param Dhamma, Pavitram Paramam Bhavam, Purusham Sasvatam Devyam Adidevam Ajam Bhagom. And that's in chapter 10. Right? This is the opulence of the Absolute. So when he heard of the opulence of the Absolute, that's when he gave that verse. So Brahman is the basic transcendental platform upon which pure devotional service takes place. And in 13.13, Krishna said, Brahman, the spirit, beginningless and subordinate to me, lies beyond the cause and effect of this material world. This Brahman, which is the goal of the impersonal act, is subordinate to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and it rests upon his existence. And here Prabhupada talks a little bit about the importance of devotional service for the living entity. And here devotional service to the Lord is very simple. One should always engage in the service of the Lord. Should eat the remnants of foodstuffs offered to the deity, smell the flowers offered to the lotus feet of the Lord, see the places of the Lord at his transcendental pastime, read of the different activities of the Lord, his reciprocation of love with his devotees, chant always the transcendental vibration, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, and observe the fasting, commemorating the appearances and disappearances of the Lord. So, Srila Prabhupada states in that one can come to an understanding of devotional service by studying this chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the three modes of material nature, through philosophical speculation. By applying our intelligence to understanding the modes of stringent control in this world, we will understand the power of the Super Soul who controls these modes. Then, if we are free from envy, we will understand our insignificance and surrender to that control. So here this is an important thing. We'll understand our insignificance. So, if we look at a crowd of maybe 1,000 people, and we try to find ourselves in that crowd. Just it said a picture and takes a picture. It's almost impossible to find yourself in there. But if you take a selfie of it, you can find yourself. So this is basically what it is. We come to the position whereby we begin to understand our insignificance. We don't think that this material world is for our enjoyment. We think that everything that happens is under the jurisdiction of the Supreme Lord. And so the smaller we become, but in that smallness, we become attached to greatness, which is the Supreme Lord. So, I think we can stop here. You have any comments or questions or something there?
One comment only, the one the text that you had highlighted, uh, which Srila Prabhupada was talking about, that this is the, which you had mentioned that this is the secret, that you hear about Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita regularly, and you do, you try to act in the mode of goodness, and you basically chant and do devotional service, and that should elevate you. So I thought that was very nice, and it's kind of reaffirming. So to the things that I've been fortunate enough to do over the last 2 years since I've started participating and coming into this into the ISKCON and Hare Krishna movement. So it's very reaffirming, and I mean I have felt all those changes also in my life. But it's always good to have this restated and reaffirmed that what you are doing is the right thing. Just keep association of devotees, hearing Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita regularly, chanting of course, and doing devotional service. So yeah, that was nice. It's always good.
Yeah, and also doing it in the right mood, not in the mode of goodness, at least in the mode of goodness. If you can't come to the transcendental, just do it in the mode of goodness, and that's better than doing it in the mode of passion. And so, good. This is how we can actually, and that question was, how does one transcend the mode of material nature? And that's by hearing Bhagavatam and associating with devotees, going to the temple, doing devotional service, things like that. This is how we transcend the mode of material nature. So it's easy. It's not like we have to go up in the mountain and meditate in the cold snow, things like that. We don't have to do that. We simply have to take shelter of the Supreme Lord. So we have 15, 16, 17, and 18, 15. We have 4 more chapters to finish the Bhagavad Gita. So at this point in time, we can stop, and at this point, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Premanandi Hari Hari.